Today, as part of the Healthy Ireland at Your Library series, we're getting some advice for parents of adolescents. So before we get into the advice for parents, what is the definition of an adolescent? What age group are we talking about?
Right. So the neuroscience around adolescence now, Clare, is talking about from about age 12 to, believe it or not, the early 20s. So we're not talking about the teen years. We're talking about that time that for some children might be the onset or just before puberty, right up until for most males about age 22, 23, for females about 21 to 22. So we're talking about a long period of reorganization. Now, it doesn't mean that during that whole time that there'll be this roaring kind of adolescent kind of phase, because the kind of pop culture idea of adolescence and the neuroscience of adolescence don't add up. It isn't 10 or 12 years of raging hormones and banging and shouting. It isn't really like that. What it is it's a time of reorganizing. So the brain is integrating. Different parts of the brain are coming together. The feeling part and the thinking part of the brain. Children are pruning away learning that they're not interested in or they don't use anymore, and they're learning new things. They're also laying down the foundation for independence, relationships, empathy. They're developing a more kind of philosophical way of thinking. So it's this time of vast change. And one of the things that's really, really key throughout those years is how our brains are keyed for novelty. So our brains are primed to look out for what's new, who's the new person around here, what's going on. And there's a really, really good reason for that. Why would we leave the lovely, comfortable nest?
Many don't.
No, many don't, for different reasons. But their brains are telling them to move on. Their brains are saying, get out there, meet new people, try new things. The world is exciting. And remember that the people that they're around are the people that they're probably going to partner with. So they're less interested in very young people and less interested, perhaps, in adults and older adults at that time. They're not uninterested, but they're really, really primed to connect with and to value the feedback of their own age group. And that's why rejection in adolescence feels almost like a physical pain.
Because it's very hard for parents, isn't it? Because you've had them from baby through the younger years, and now you've got to essentially let them go a little bit and let them grow into their own person.
Yeah.
Even though at 13, 14, 15, you're still so young.
Yes.
And you have to just give them that chance.
Yeah, it is tough for parents because remember 6 months ago they were just in sixth class, you know, in a nice little cozy primary school setting where everybody knew one another since they were 4 and they were highly protected. And then now all of a sudden they're talking about new things. They have friends you haven't met. But remember that development is sequential, and your child is not going to go from being sort of 13 and by your side to 13 and a half all the way up to their early adulthood and not wanting anything to do with you. All of these things happen in little tiny steps. So we should be preparing our child for independence, but remembering that human development is on a continuum of dependence, healthy dependence, to healthy independence. And adolescents are somewhere along the way on that continuum. And they don't just keep going forward. They go back, they go forward, they go back, they go forward. So one person might be very socially skilled. Another person might be academic. Another person might be athletic. Another might be a friend maker. So they can have different sets of skills as well. So they're not all ready for all the same things at the same time.
So do we trust that we've laid the foundations in the early years and just leave them to it, or do we still need to be involved to a certain extent?
We still need to be involved, but we do try to trust ourselves and to be good to ourselves and to show compassion to ourselves that we've done the right thing. We've done the best we can, and we've probably done a pretty good job because we've gotten them to this age. So have trust in yourself as a parent, but stay connected. It's really, really important as peers and going out there and socializing and novelty is for your child. They do need a base to come back with, because that's when we're really strong and that's when we're really good adventurers, when we have a harbor to come back to for safety. And that's who the family is. That's what they are. They're somewhere where the adolescent can come back and check in on boundaries, check in on standards, check in on what their parents think are important, and also to check in for learning and support. They need our support and they need us to teach them.
Because I think another reason it's difficult for us as parents is not only because we're letting our babies go a little, but also because we were adolescents as well, and we know what a hazy time it is, and we know how we looked on our own parents, that all of a sudden they were uncool and annoying, and you don't want to become that person.
No, you don't, but you will become that person. So it's kind of that balance of remembering that if you're having a tough day with your 15-year-old and he or she is kind of giving out to you and telling you how cool you are, try to remember that that voice is coming out of that baby on that lovely picture on the wall. So go back to your hopes and dreams. What were your hopes and dreams for your child? You and they would have a really good relationship, that you would always stay connected. They would do their best they can, and they would stay connected to their family and their community. So remember that's still your goal as a parent. But then also remember that you have a responsibility to kind of let them go and to kind of remember yourself when you were a teen. So maybe putting yourself back into your own shoes and saying, wow, my 15-year-old self, what was that like? What did I do that my parents didn't know about? What was I seeking? I was seeking a bit of adventure. I was seeking, some fun. I wasn't trying to destroy my parents' lives or drive everybody crazy or end up in the principal's office. I wasn't trying to do that. I was just trying to have a bit of fun. I was trying to hang out with my friends. So remember that their motivation to do some of the things that they do doesn't come from a place of malice. It comes from a place of discovery, of novelty seeking, of not having a lot of experience. And that's one of the things that gets a lot of adolescents into trouble, just not having that life experience. And that's why if we stay connected, we're keeping them fairly close to us, whether it's just mentally, not necessarily always physically, but hopefully physically too. We're keeping them involved in the family so they have that resource. It's lovely to know that you have a family to fall back. It may not be where they go to you for a question. They might go to their aunt or their uncle or a grandparent. But they have that as a resource system for them. And also it's a way of kind of knowing what's going on in their lives. So it is really important that we stay connected in adolescence.
How do you stay connected to the adolescents when most of them have a smartphone in their hands? And that seems to be where they connect with all of their friends, and they're constantly on. How do you navigate that?
Well, you try to help them as much as you can in managing their own screen time. And listen, in adolescence, that's really, really key. So as we begin to equip our children with more technology. Before we do that, we set down the boundaries around that technology. We don't give them a smartphone and then put the rules in place because they have what they want and their motivation levels to cooperate have gone down. They're really motivated before they've gotten a new liberty, a new freedom, a new privilege. They're really motivated to say, yeah, no, I'll do that and I'll do that. Doesn't mean they'll do it exactly the way you agree. But the overall agreement should be in place. So for your very young teens who still need a lot of sleep, who are really involved in a whole new era of their life, lots of new subjects, lots of new demands upon them, they should really be putting their devices outside of their bedroom before it's time to go to sleep. There should be times in the day where we just don't use our screens. So a family meal is a really, really good time. Whether we're having dinner at home or we're gone out for a treat, that we all put our devices aside and that we say, no, this time is really important. It's time to interact. But also showing an interest in their lives and their friends. They may be doing things that we're not that interested in. They might not be pursuing the sports that we played. They might be going off into a new activity we know little about. So ask questions about it. So if you did soccer and they're doing rugby, or you did hurling and they're doing tennis, ask about those other things. Find out what's going on in school. Get to know their friends. So sometimes parents feel that we have no business getting involved in the friendships of our adolescents. You do have a business. You're not going to be hanging out with them for sure, but you will most certainly know their names, have an idea of their families, know where they live. Always know where you're dropping your adolescent off.
How much conflict is normal? Because again, I think it's another one of the cliches that you're going to have shouting, roaring, banging of doors. Does the neuroscience back that up?
Well, what the neuroscience says is that adolescents tend to experience anxiety at about 25% of the population at any one time. So that means that a quarter of all teenagers are probably anxious at some time during their adolescence. Not all of the time, maybe. And so that probably means everybody in adolescence sometime. So think about anxiety as being normal and natural. And the other thing is anger, of course. They feel really big feelings. And that anger, what is anger? If we think of the function of anger, anger is there to energize us, to get us to protect ourselves. So these are normal, natural things that we shouldn't be afraid of. And the boundary around that, of course, is we don't allow anxiety to make our adolescent, for example, not go to school or avoid all social interaction, or we don't allow anger to become something that maybe causes them to hurt other people and to be expressed in an inappropriate way. But we do allow those things to be expressed. We're not afraid of them as human phenomenon. We're comfortable that we are angry sometimes. We are upset. We feel anxious about new situations. The new demands being made on your teenager, they're huge. New organizational skills, they have all these different subjects. They're being taught by different teachers in different parts of the building. They've got to get books from here and there. And that's only the beginning. When they're not around their teachers, there's all of the social stuffs. There's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So they're all there, and they're all new, and they're struggling with that. And they're struggling with this kind of balance of admitting what they don't know, pretending they know stuff they don't know, and then wondering what's acceptable to say yes or no to. So there's a lot going on, and so we can see why they would normally feel anxious or feel angry about the situation. Anxiety, the function really is to get us to prepare for situations. It's there, we haven't bred it out of the human nervous system because it serves that really important function of preparing us for situations. If your child is experiencing lots of really big feelings, so maybe they are, if you like, hyper-aroused. They're kind of up here and they're so cross that they're banging doors. Take a break. Say to your child, now is not the time to talk about this, because it isn't the time to talk about this. So I like to use, if you like, Dan Siegel's idea of the hand-based brain to talk to teenagers. So this is the part of the brain. This is my brainstem. This is survival in here, the really primitive parts of our brain. And these are the uniquely human parts of our brain. When we're dysregulated, when we're very anxious, very frightened, or very angry, this part of our brain and this part of our brain sort of disconnect. The flow of energy up there isn't as strong. So we're really relying on survival down here. So your adolescent is not in a good place to listen to big, long speeches, the intellectualization of topics and respect and language and all of these things. They really are just thinking survival. I'm under attack. I'm being criticized. My parent is reminding me of my vulnerable parts, that I feel rejection really easily. I'm not quite mixing with my friends. I'm not doing as well in school as I think they want me to do. So I feel under threat. My identity is under threat. Let them off. Let them go to their room and calm down. Say to them, maybe we can talk about this later. If your child acts in a threatening way to you, say, I can't speak to you right now while you're this angry. So I'm going to go downstairs and take a break. Take a break, but come back to those situations. And when you come back, remember to empathize with them before you tell them what it is that they've done wrong. If they feel that they're not being listened to, if they feel that we don't get their feelings, the big feelings are just going to get bigger. You're not really listening to me. You don't understand what I'm saying because you're just lecturing me. You're telling me about when you were 15 and how you got an A in this subject. And that doesn't fit with how I feel right now. I just need you to listen to me. So that's all that parents really need to do. And they need to take the pressure off that they're going to have the answer, because maybe just listening is enough.
It's also a time where they're going to push boundaries and they're going to try things that you might not think is a good idea, whether it's sneaking off somewhere, whether it's experimenting with alcohol. How do you handle those blips without coming down too heavy, but also setting up that boundary of what's acceptable?
Yeah, so part of it is going back and remembering when you were an adolescent, as we said before, that's really, really key, that you don't forget that you didn't have an eventless adolescence. That's one thing. The other thing, of course, is to keep their safety in mind. So if they're slipping off to something that really is out of their realms of safety and their well-being, then you need to put down really strong boundaries around that. But you also need to explain to them why you're putting that boundary down. So they don't just hear no, they hear no and the reason. And the reason usually is that I care about you. You're my little boy or girl, and I really care about you, and I want to keep you safe. And I know you're growing up, and I know you want to try new things, and I know you have all these new friends. I don't know who they are, or I might know about them, and I might know that is not a safe place for you to be. So I'm going to protect you. And I can't really protect you if I don't know where you are. A really important thing for parents to have in place with their adolescents as their adolescent is venturing out a bit more each year is to say, no matter where you are, no matter what you've done, no matter what state anybody is in, you can always ring me when you need to come home. So if you're in a house and people have been using a substance, they've gotten drunk, or you just don't feel safe there for any reason, you can always ring me. I'll go there, get you, and bring you home. I, as a parent, would rather get out of bed and drive somewhere and bring you home and zip it and let you go to bed and talk about it tomorrow than think that maybe my adolescent would stay in a location where maybe they're not safe.
Yeah, it's such good advice and so important, as you say, to stay connected.
Yeah.
What about the sleep side of things then?
Yeah.
Is it okay for them to stay in bed till 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things there. So the adolescent clock kind of changes. So if you like, our little kids up to about 10 are more like us adults in a sleep kind of way. Our clocks are more in sync with one another. But from about 11 to about 23, our clocks are kind of a little bit out, and they're later. So that's something to keep in mind. We don't have 7 a.m. starts for school here in Ireland, and that's a really, really good thing. But it is really important that our teenagers and our adolescents that they get sleep. It's really, really important, and we target that 8 hours of sleep, but they actually need more like about 9 hours of sleep. So it doesn't mean they'll always get 9 hours of sleep, but if you keep that as the target, they're more likely to kind of get closer to that. So some of the things to think about is that negotiating with your adolescent some kind of a curfew around devices so that they wind down. And they can do either, they can read a book they're interested in, or they can do their book-based study last thing at night. They can do other relaxing things so that they get to wind down and get their sleep. Having good sleep hygiene means having as regular a bedtime as possible. So if you have an adolescent who sleeps in until, say, 2 in the afternoon at the weekends and is up really, really late, it's really important that you try to help them to not mirror a school day, but make it not quite as different. The neuroscience would say that when we are sleep deprived throughout the week, when we try to top that up in 1 or 2 days, that we're not really doing that. Okay, so you might feel like I got a bit of rest today, but that's not really how sleep works. Sleep works on rhythms that should be pretty much almost equal over a long period of time. So it doesn't really make up for being up at 2 a.m. and then getting up at 7 for school. It doesn't really work out that way. But if they are exhausted, do let them have lie-ins. They may need lie-ins because they're doing study and sports, or they've had a late night. So that's not a bad thing.
So if you're in a situation where you're rowing all the time with your adolescent, from everything from helping around the house to school work, to their friends, to their social life, how do you pare it back and start again?
Okay, so I would try to think to myself, or if I'm co-parenting with the other parent, and say, look what's going on here, and this isn't what we want, and come up with a plan away from the child. Come up with a plan away from your adolescent of, this is how I would like things to be. I would like us to get along a bit more. What do you think? I find that when I mention school, he blows up. And what's it with you? Well, I find that when I mention friends, he blows up. And so try to figure out what the themes are, and then approach your adolescent in a really non-judgmental way. Approach your child to talk about a difficulty when that difficulty is not present. Because if that difficulty is happening now, like it's don't have this conversation at 7 o'clock on a Friday evening when they're begging to go out to a disco at 8 o'clock. Have it at a time where it's not an issue, when everyone is really calm, and then maybe talk to them about, well, this is what I'm hoping for. What do you think is realistic? Where can we compromise? Do you think that I'm a bit over the top when I think that you have to be in at this time? So what time do you think is reasonable to be in? Have a conversation about that. Have some give and take. Now, it doesn't mean that just because you're compromising with your adolescent that it's all going to be about what they want. No, I think 2 a.m. is a really good time. And okay, so that's what it isn't about that. It's about having a compromise that works for both parents.
It's more rope, isn't it?
It's more rope,
and it's more
yeah.
staying connected. They're the same
Yeah.
themes that are coming up again and again,
Yeah.
and just listening to them and
Yeah.
hearing them rather than trying to kind of badger
Yeah.
them with how they should be behaving, because this isn't the right time for that.
Yeah. So figure out what it is that they want to do, that you're fighting over. And figure out what's difficult about that. So if it's about going out, figure out, how can we make that safe and doable and reasonable, given whether it's a school night or whatever the other concerns are. If it's about something like helping out around the house, talk to them about how you need help. Say, listen, this is just about us all mucking in. You see what I do. You see what your other parent does. So this is about us all kind of mucking in together. And we don't expect you to do all of the things that I do. But we do expect you to chip in. And what do you think is reasonable? What things do you think are doable for you that you could help me out with? That's all I'm asking for. And then see what they come up with. They might own that task then. And, you might have the situation say, well, that's the part you agreed on.
Should we use technology to keep an eye on them? Should we be monitoring their social media pages to see what they're getting up to? Should we be looking at trackers on their phones to see where they're at? Because it's a very different world, this modern one, for adolescents.
Yeah, it's a really different world. I would say that my first impulse would not be to use trackers and not to track our children, that they need to learn to be their own young people, and that we won't be able to track them when they head off to work or college. So that's not going to be an option.
We might try.
We might
but
try.
No, that's not what you want. You're looking to build resilient,
Yeah.
responsible adults that can do it for themselves. And this is their testing phase.
This is the testing phase where you're keeping boundaries, but at the same time, you're drip feeding them, new freedoms. And it's really important to relate that to your child, that this isn't just something that's in my mind, that my child sees that. When you make me, as my adolescent, feel more comfortable at home, when I can sit home and watch that film and know that you really are going to come home at the agreed time, or you're going to be at the agreed meeting place, I feel better. And I'm less likely to be texting you and calling you and wondering where you are, or telling you can't go out next week. If we have trust between us, you actually get more liberties too.
So it's not necessarily something parents have to brace themselves for or fight their way through. It can be a very positive time.
It can absolutely be positive, and it can be a really fun time for parents, because adolescents are full of opinions and ideas and their take on lots of things, what's going on in society, maybe films they've seen, and they have all these different takes on things. So it's really about connecting, enjoying their opinions. You may not agree with them, but it's enjoying that banter between parent and child, because new conversations are happening. I would say to parents, really embrace adolescence and allow it to flow over you. Keep your connection with your adolescents, but keep them fairly close to you.
So how involved should we get with issues that might arise for our adolescents? Should we wade in and rescue them, or let them solve their own problems?
We should definitely get involved. We should definitely show an interest in things that they find difficult or problematic for them. We should definitely give them the message that we're there for them. However, what I would suggest to parents is, remember that you're not always going to be there for them, and that they are going to have to solve problems when you're not around. Little problems and maybe even big problems. And you're at that stage in your life where you're doing new things and maybe having new friendships and first-time relationships, and you need to be able to stand up on your own 2 feet. So what I would say to parents is, use a problem-solving method with them. For example, have them tell you the story of that problem. Have them tell you from their perspective what it is about the situation that they find difficult. I text him, he doesn't text me back enough. It could be, I try my best in that subject and that teacher just hates me. It could be whatever it is, find out what it is that they have to say. With our adolescents, sometimes when they're telling us about something that's a problem, we might not like the language they use. We might not like the stance they're taking. Hear them out. Because as soon as we start judging what it is that they're doing, I hope you didn't do that. You didn't use that word, did you? They will start to censor what it is that they're saying. Absolutely. They'll change the story, they'll make it not quite as serious, or they'll move on and they won't have you involved in it. Listen out, warts and all, and then feedback to them what you think you heard. Did I understand this right? Is that what it is? So this is all about you and Jessica not getting along, and she expects more texts and you're not just up for that, and boys and girls are seeing things differently, or whatever the problem is. And then ask your teenager, what do you want to do about this? What would make this better?
What about the way we're living at the moment with COVID-19? As you said, we're giving them a lot more freedom to go out in their social circle, but now there's a big worry around social distancing, hand sanitizing, all of that. And then if you're keeping them in more, there's a lot more time on screens. So it's a tough time for parents.
It is a really tough time. And
for adolescents too.
Yeah, and for adolescents. For people who have to live in the same household, there are new stresses on us. There's a new energy in the household if we're all around one another a lot more. So what I would be saying to parents is try as much as you can to have time together. So it might be meals, it might be doing family things, but also look for times in the day when you can have time apart. Your adolescent is going to need privacy. They're going to need to get things done, whether it's their study, whether it's communicate with friends. So give them the space and the time to do those kinds of things, but give them options of being around with you as well. Keep in mind that they may be more dependent on screens, and we're going to have to be flexible about that. That doesn't mean that we break all of our own rules. It could mean that we still don't have a screen at mealtime, and that we do have a time in the evening where we put them aside so we can wind down. So it is about being flexible, but it also holding firm to maybe some ideas that we really feel are important. But also remembering that as we've all become more dependent on screens, that our adolescent may not be able to come off a screen and just suddenly know what to do. We might need to help them with ideas. They might have become really reliant on those screens. So it might be a suggestion like, well, I'm walking the dog. I'd love if you came with me. Let's go for a walk around the block together. It might be, let's get out in the garden for 5 minutes and pass the ball back and forth. It might be to do something, but it's about breaking the preoccupation with screen and then being able to go back to it if you need to.
Where can parents go for more advice and resources on parenting adolescents?
I would say to parents of adolescents that there's lots of great resources in their local library. So check out not just their library, but the Library Services website. And also in the community, there are places such as a local family resource centre that might have, for example, Parents Plus adolescent course, contact primary care. So you don't have to have huge difficulties to ring up one of your local services and say, where is there a family communications course? They're available all over the country.
Peadar, Maxwell, thank you very much.
Thank you, Clare.